The snow had started hours earlier, the kind that doesn't fall gently but attacks, sideways, sharp, relentless. Minneapolis streets were nearly empty, buried under thick white layers that swallowed sound and erased edges. Officer Daniel Reed guided his patrol cruiser through the storm with tired precision, shoulders stiff, eyes burning from exhaustion. 12 hours on duty had turned into 16 after a multi-car pileup on I-94. His radio was finally quiet, the city temporarily subdued by the weather, but Daniel's body hadn't caught up yet. Every movement felt heavier than the last. Beside him in the back of the cruiser, Rex sat alert despite the long shift. The German Shepherd's dark eyes tracked everything beyond the windows, the drifting snow, the shadows between parked cars, the faint silhouettes of buildings half lost in white. Rex never truly rested on duty. Daniel trusted that vigilance more than any piece of equipment he carried. They turned onto a narrow street near an old bus terminal, streetlights glowing like dying embers through the snowfall. Daniel slowed instinctively. Something felt off, not dangerous exactly, but wrong in the quiet way that made the hairs at the back of his neck rise. That's when he saw her. She stood near the bus stop bench, hunched forward, arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold her body together. Her hair was dusted white, her coat thin and soaked through, shoes dark with melted snow. She swayed slightly, fighting gravity, fighting the cold. Most people stayed inside on nights like this. Anyone still out here was either desperate or lost. Daniel pulled the cruiser over and stepped out. The cold hit him immediately, slicing through his uniform, stealing his breath. Snow crunched under his boots as he approached slowly, hands visible, voice calm. "Ma'am," he called over the wind, "are you all right?" She lifted her head. Her face was pale, lips bluish, eyes sunken but alert. There was something else there too, fear, deep and reflexive, like she expected the world to hurt her again. "I'm fine," she said quickly, though her teeth chattered as she spoke. "Just waiting." Daniel glanced at the empty road. No buses were running this late in weather like this. He'd heard dispatch cancel routes hours ago. He nodded anyway, not pushing. "You shouldn't be out here," he said gently. "It's dangerous tonight." She looked past him, scanning the street as if someone might emerge from the snow. "I'll be gone soon." Rex shifted in the cruiser, watching through the open door, ears pricked forward. Daniel hesitated, then made a decision that felt small at the time. He unbuttoned his heavy police coat, the one rated for brutal winters, shrugged it off, and held it out to her. "Take this," he said, "at least until you get somewhere warm." Her eyes widened. "I can't." "You can," he interrupted softly. "Please." For a long second she didn't move. Then her shoulders sagged, exhaustion winning. She stepped forward and took the coat with trembling hands, wrapping it tightly around herself. It swallowed her frame, sleeves hanging past her fingers. She inhaled deeply, as if the warmth carried more than heat. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel smiled, a tired but genuine expression. "What's your name?" She opened her mouth, then froze. Rex growled. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was low, controlled, and razor-sharp, the sound Rex only made when something deeply wrong brushed against his instincts. Daniel turned immediately, hand drifting toward his holster, scanning the street behind them. "What is it, boy?" he murmured. Rex rose inside the cruiser, muscles tense, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the bus stop. Snow continued to fall, thick and blinding, but Rex's focus didn't waver. Daniel looked back at the woman. Her face had gone rigid. She clutched the coat tighter, knuckles white. "Is there someone with you?" Daniel asked. She shook her head too quickly. "No, I need to go." She stepped back, already retreating into the snow. "Wait," Daniel said. "It's not safe." But she turned and disappeared between two buildings, swallowed by the storm as if she'd never been there at all. Daniel stood there for a moment, uneasy. He told himself she was just another person down on her luck, another face the city forgot too easily. But Rex didn't relax. The dog barked once, sharp, urgent, and strained against the door. Daniel opened the cruiser. Rex leapt down, nose to the ground immediately, inhaling deeply, tail rigid. He pulled toward the narrow alley beside the bus stop. "Rex," Daniel said firmly, "easy." But Rex didn't respond to the command. He followed the scent, paws cutting through fresh snow, determination radiating from every movement. Daniel followed, heart beginning to pound. The alley was dark, snow drifting down between brick walls. The wind funneled through it, howling low. Rex stopped suddenly near a dumpster, sniffing hard, then whined softly. Daniel shined his flashlight around. Snow covered everything, but not perfectly. Near the wall, something dark peeked through the white. He knelt, brushing snow aside with a gloved hand. Fabric. Thick dark blue wool. Daniel's breath caught. It matched the lining of his coat. He straightened slowly as Rex lifted his head and barked again, louder now, eyes fixed deeper into the alley, toward a trail that shouldn't have been there at all. 2 sets of footprints led in. None led out. And somewhere in the storm, Rex had just realized the woman wasn't simply cold or lost. She was running. The alley was a corridor of white and shadow. Snow clung to the brick walls like frozen spiderwebs, drifting in layers so thick it muffled sound. Officer Daniel Reed's boots crunched as he followed Rex, every instinct screaming that this was no ordinary winter night. The German shepherd's ears were pinned back, tail stiff, muscles taut like coiled steel. This was the kind of alert that didn't come from training. This was primal. Daniel had never seen Rex like this, not even during riots, not during gun calls, not even when chasing a suspect through city streets. "Rex, easy," Daniel murmured, trying to soothe him, his hand resting lightly on the dog's head. But Rex ignored him. His gaze was locked on the shadows at the far end of the alley, growl low and vibrating from deep within his chest. The sound was different, warning, not aggression, a signal that something unseen had triggered every nerve in the dog's body. Daniel's own heartbeat matched Rex's rhythm, a rapid thrum that refused to settle. The wind cut through the alley, sharp and sudden, rattling a loose dumpster lid. Daniel squinted into the gray haze. There was movement, just beyond a chain-link fence, snow disturbed as if something or someone had recently passed through. He signaled with his flashlight, but the beam caught nothing solid. Just snow, just shadows, just the whisper of the city breathing. Rex suddenly barked, single, sharp, and explosive. Daniel froze. The sound seemed to echo unnaturally, bouncing off walls and snowbanks. It wasn't a bark of threat to Daniel, it was a message. Something was out there, watching, hiding, waiting. Daniel stepped closer to Rex, hand gripping the leash, knuckles white beneath his gloves. His mind raced. "Stay close, boy," he whispered, scanning every corner. Then he noticed it, footprints partially covered by fresh snow. 2 distinct sets, one smaller, delicate, the other larger, heavier. But the prints didn't match any typical pedestrian pattern. They led deeper into the alley, toward a chain of abandoned warehouses. And strangely, they didn't continue past the far gate. It was as if whoever made them had vanished into thin air. Daniel's breath fogged in the air. He crouched to inspect. One of the prints had a torn piece of fabric caught in the snow, a dark blue wool that matched the coat he'd just given the woman. Panic rose like bile in his throat. How could his coat be here? He had given it to her only minutes ago. Rex barked again, insistent, then began to move. Not walking, running, pulling Daniel forward, zigzagging toward a gap between 2 warehouse walls. Daniel stumbled to keep up, snow soaking his boots and seeping into his socks, but he didn't dare slow. Rex's body radiated purpose, a clarity that Daniel envied. The dog's nose was low to the ground, sniffing, analyzing, hunting. Daniel's mind spun with questions. Had she been followed? Was she in danger? Or had something far worse happened in the time it took him to give her warmth? They reached the gap. The snow was heavier here, piling waist-high in some spots. Rex pawed frantically at the frozen earth, whining once, loud and urgent. Daniel leaned over, brushing snow aside with gloved hands. There, faint but distinct, was a mark, a handprint in the snow pressed into the dirt underneath. It was small, delicate, definitely hers, but next to it, pressed deeper, almost aggressively, were larger marks. Someone else had been here. Daniel's pulse raced. He scanned the warehouse fronts. Windows were broken, doors hanging ajar. The darkness seemed alive, as if the buildings themselves were holding their breath. Rex's low growl turned into a full bark, a deep, commanding sound that made Daniel flinch. His eyes followed the dog's line of sight, but snow swirled so thickly it was impossible to see more than a few feet. And yet Daniel felt it, something beyond the snow, watching, waiting. A sudden gust carried the scent, faint but unmistakable, something metallic, something sharp, something alive. Rex twitched violently, nose in the air, eyes fixed. Daniel realized with a chill that Rex was following more than footprints. He was tracking presence, fear, survival. The dog wasn't just searching for her. He was trying to protect her. And whatever or whoever was out there, it had just noticed their intrusion. Daniel took a cautious step forward. The crunch of snow under his boots seemed deafening in the frozen stillness. Then he heard it, a soft shuffle behind a stack of crates, deliberate and careful. A shadow moved, low and fast, slipping across the wall. Rex barked twice, then lunged forward, straining at the leash. Daniel yanked back, heart hammering. "Rex, wait," he hissed. But it was too late. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman wrapped in his coat, frozen with fear, hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with panic. She ran a few steps and then froze, realizing she was cornered. Daniel exhaled sharply. Relief washed over him for half a second, then tightened in his chest as he realized. She hadn't expected him to be here. She hadn't expected Rex to track her. And now, in the middle of this deserted, snow-swallowed alley, with the storm howling and her panic palpable, Daniel understood the danger she'd been fleeing. She wasn't just cold. She wasn't just lost. She was running from something far worse than the winter night. Rex barked again, louder, more insistent, as if to warn Daniel. And then the woman's eyes shifted, darting to the end of the alley, widening in terror. Daniel followed her gaze, and his stomach dropped. The figure emerging from the snow wasn't a stranger. It was someone who should never have been outside. Someone who had been waiting for her all along. The alley stretched ahead like a frozen tunnel, shadow and snow merging into one indistinct void. Daniel Reed's breath fogged in clouds as he tried to steady his racing heart. Rex was taut beside him, muscles coiled, nose pressed to the ground. The woman in his coat, her name he still didn't know, clutched the wool tightly around herself, shivering, eyes darting between him and the darkness at the alley's far end. Every instinct in Daniel screamed that this was far from over. They stepped cautiously into deeper snow, each footfall sinking, muffled, leaving temporary marks that the storm would erase almost immediately. Daniel squinted, trying to follow the footprints, two sets, hers smaller, delicate, and another heavier, almost predatory. But soon the prints became incomplete, breaking off into a whiteness that refused to reveal secrets. Whoever had been here before them had vanished, leaving only whispers of presence. Rex growled low, stepping forward, then stopped abruptly. He pawed at the snow, circling an area where something dark protruded from the white. Daniel knelt and brushed snow away with his gloves. A torn piece of fabric emerged, dark blue, coarse wool. His heart tightened. It matched his coat. Had she dropped it? Was it planted? Questions tumbled in his mind as he scanned the alley walls. Then he saw the shadows moving, subtle, deliberate. A trash bin shifted slightly. A chain rattled in the wind, though no one could be seen. Rex's growl escalated into a bark, full and commanding. Daniel followed the dog's gaze and froze. Just beyond the alley, the footprints led to a small, crumbling fence, bent inward as if someone had forced their way through. The other side opened onto a vacant lot littered with abandoned cars, snow piling over their roofs, windows cracked, frozen fog inside. "Stay close," Daniel whispered, hand on his holster. The woman didn't answer, only nodded, her eyes wide, body trembling. There was fear there, raw and palpable, not from the cold, but from knowing she was being hunted. Daniel had seen it before, in battered victims and desperate witnesses, but the intensity in her gaze was something else entirely. Rex led the way, padding silently, nose twitching as he followed a scent that was faint but real. Daniel noticed the footprints ending abruptly at the lot's edge. No continuation, no escape, nothing. It was as if someone or something had been lifted off the earth, leaving no trace. His pulse raced. He couldn't shake the chill creeping up his spine. Then Daniel heard it, a faint rustle followed by a sharp clink. He froze, listening. Rex stiffened, ears flat, hackles rising. The sound came again, soft footsteps, careful, deliberate, weaving between abandoned vehicles. Someone was moving, deliberately avoiding leaving tracks. Someone close. "Who's there?" Daniel called, voice steady but low. Snow swirled between them, drifting past the lot's edges, carrying the faint metallic scent of danger. A shadow shifted near the largest of the abandoned cars. Daniel's breath hitched. The woman's hand gripped his arm suddenly, nails digging into his sleeve. Rex barked, breaking the silence, then bolted toward the shadow. Daniel lunged after him, sliding through the snow. He rounded a vehicle to see nothing. No one. The shadow was gone. The lot was empty except for the dead vehicles and snow drifting across the ground. The woman's coat fell slightly open as she clutched it tighter, revealing a trembling hand, thin from weeks of cold and fear. "They're watching," she whispered, barely audible. "They know I'm here." Daniel's mind raced. Who were they? Why would someone vanish like this, leaving no footprints, no warning? And how had she survived until now, wandering these abandoned lots in a storm like this? He glanced at Rex. The dog's ears were pinned, tail rigid, eyes darting from one shadow to another. Every instinct in Daniel told him the storm wasn't the only danger. There was something moving, patient and precise, out there in the white. Then he noticed the smallest detail, a trail of footprints diverging from the lot, partially buried under new snow. A single boot print, larger, heavy, and unmistakably deliberate. It led away from the vanished shadow into a side street covered in swirling white. Daniel swallowed hard. "Rex, we follow carefully." The dog barked once, low and urgent, then nudged forward. Daniel led the woman after him, heart pounding as the snow deepened, footprints fatting under each step. He couldn't shake the feeling that every second counted, that whoever had been here, watching, waiting, was still out there, closing in. They reached the street, and the wind carried the faint sound of movement, soft, almost imperceptible. Daniel's eyes narrowed. The footprints ahead ended abruptly at the edge of a metal grate covering a storm drain. Rex stopped, growled low, nose to the ground, then barked once, sharp and insistent. Daniel froze, realizing something terrifying. The trail didn't just stop. Someone or something was below. And it was waiting. The storm thrashed against the city as Officer Daniel Reed led the woman down the narrow, snow-choked streets. Rex's paws crunched in the drifts, ears pricked and muscles tense, every movement precise. Daniel's gloved hands were raw from gripping the leash, mind spinning with questions. Who was she? Where had she been? And who or what had been following her through the frozen maze of alleys and empty lots? They turned a corner and the flicker of emergency lights caught Daniel's eye. Backup had arrived, a patrol car sliding to a stop, red and blue beams slicing through the swirling snow. Daniel exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He lowered the woman to a sidewalk bench, careful not to jostle her, and looked down at her. She shivered violently, eyes wide, staring into the storm. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She shook her head, unable to speak, lips pressed together. Daniel glanced around, noting the vacant streets, the shuttered stores, the way the snow consumed everything in its white haze. Then his eyes caught something on a utility pole, a poster, partially torn and frozen over with ice. Daniel walked closer, squinting through the snowfall. The image made his stomach drop. It was her, the woman in his coat, 6 months missing, presumed dead. There she was, staring back at him from the glossy paper, face pale, eyes hollow, the same scar along her jaw. She disappeared without a trace. Police reports had gone cold months ago. Friends had mourned her. Family had cried in vain, and now here she was standing, or rather trembling in the snow, alive in front of him. Daniel's hands shook slightly. "It can't be," he murmured. Rex growled softly, tail stiff, nose low to the ground. The dog's instincts had been right all along. This woman was not just someone lost in a storm. She had a story, a history, a danger that had never left her. The woman's eyes flicked to the poster, and for a moment she froze, lips trembling. "They," she whispered, voice barely audible, "they thought I was gone." Daniel's heart raced. "Who thought you were gone?" Before she could answer, a sudden movement caught Rex's attention. The dog barked, low and urgent, dragging Daniel's gaze toward the frozen river nearby. The streetlights reflected off the ice, making it glimmer like glass. Daniel's stomach twisted. He followed Rex's gaze and froze. Beneath the thin, snow-covered ice, he could make out the roof of a car, half buried, glistening dangerously. The license plate matched the missing woman's file. His mind refused to process. That car had been her car. That car had been reported submerged months ago. She had been inside, presumed dead. Rex whined, pawing at the frozen ground, tail rigid. He turned back toward the woman, then back to the river, clearly agitated. Daniel realized the impossible truth. The car was a setup. The storm had hidden it, the snow had buried it, but the reality was chilling. She wasn't in the river. She was out there somewhere, and someone wanted the world to believe she wasn't alive. The woman's teeth chattered violently. They tried to make sure I didn't come back. Her eyes flicked nervously over Daniel's shoulder, scanning every dark corner. I had no choice. I had to disappear. Daniel felt a chill deeper than the winter cold. The city around them seemed silent, holding its breath. The snowstorm roared, but the danger was not in the weather. It was in the shadows, in the footprints erased under the drifting snow, in the quiet that pressed on them like a weight. "Stay with me," Daniel said firmly. He knelt beside her, hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "We'll get you somewhere safe." Rex barked again, louder, insistent, pulling Daniel slightly toward the side streets. Daniel followed the dog's lead, glancing back at the woman. Her hand trembled as she held the coat tighter around herself. She was exhausted, terrified, but alive. Alive in a world that had already written her off. They moved cautiously, the city streets empty except for the storm. Then Daniel saw it, a figure standing across the street, partially hidden behind a lamppost, snow drifting across the silhouette. The figure didn't move, didn't approach, but the presence was undeniable. The woman froze, lips parting slightly, eyes wide with recognition and fear. Daniel's pulse spiked. "Do you know him?" he asked. Her whisper barely carried over the wind. He's the reason I'm missing. He's the reason they thought I was dead." Before Daniel could respond, Rex barked furiously, charging a few steps forward, fur bristling. The figure turned slightly, slipping into the shadows between buildings, disappearing from sight as if swallowed by the snow. Daniel's stomach dropped. Whoever had been waiting for her was still out there, watching, patient, dangerous. And he wasn't alone. The storm pressed in, covering footprints, hiding threats. Daniel realized that the night was far from over. The woman's survival had just become a race against time, and he had no idea what they would do next. The wind howled across the frozen river, cutting through Daniel Reed's uniform and sending icy needles into his skin. Snow whipped across the ice in thick drifts, erasing footprints almost as soon as they were made. The city behind them was nothing but blurred streetlights and shadowed buildings. Rex's paws crunched over the frozen surface with precision, each step careful, deliberate. The dog's low growls echoed in the emptiness, vibrating through the icy night, sending shivers down Daniel's spine. The woman clutched the coat tighter, her body trembling violently, not from the cold, but from raw fear. She followed Daniel silently, eyes darting to every shadow, every frozen lump of snow, as if the storm itself might harbor the dangers chasing her. Daniel's gaze swept across the river. The ice looked solid in places, dangerous and cracked in others, shimmering under the flicker of emergency lights that had followed them from the street. Something about it felt wrong, ominous. His pulse quickened as Rex stopped abruptly, ears pinned, hackles raised, growling low. The dog's body tensed like a drawn bow. Daniel approached cautiously, flashlight cutting through the blizzard. Beneath the snow, the faint outline of a car roof glinted in the pale light. His heart skipped. His mind froze as he recognized the shape, a mid-sized sedan, half buried under ice and snow. The license plate number was unmistakable. It matched the missing woman's file. That's her car, Daniel muttered under his breath. The woman gasped, hand flying to her mouth. They wanted me gone. They wanted everyone to think I drowned. Her voice was barely audible over the wind, trembling with a mixture of fear, relief, and anger. The river, it was supposed to be the end. Daniel felt bile rise in his throat. Whoever had orchestrated this had gone to terrifying lengths. A staged accident months ago designed to erase her completely. And yet, here she was, alive. Somehow surviving, evading detection, hiding from a world that had already marked her as dead. Rex barked again, sharper this time, pulling at the leash. The dog's instincts screamed that the danger wasn't over, that the storm was covering more than snow, that the shadows around the river held secrets. Daniel followed Rex's gaze and froze. Across the icy expanse, faint footprints led away from the car toward a narrow channel where the river curved, almost invisible beneath snow and ice. Someone, or something, had left, but the trail stopped abruptly. Daniel's mind raced. How could anyone have moved through the snow so precisely and disappeared without a trace? The woman stepped closer to Daniel, trembling. He's still out there, she whispered. He'll come back, he always does. Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at her, fear etched into every line of her face, exhaustion in the curve of her shoulders. But there was also a flicker of defiance. Somehow she had survived. Somehow she had escaped the river, the lies, the world that wanted her dead. And now they were both standing on the edge of it, with Rex between them, the dog sensing danger no human could see. Suddenly, a shadow moved along the far edge of the riverbank. Daniel tensed, hand hovering near his holster. The woman froze, eyes wide, lips parting in a silent gasp. The shape emerged slowly from the drifts, tall and deliberate, black coat blending into the night. Every instinct in Daniel screamed that this was the man, the one she had been running from all these months. Rex barked, low and furious, stepping between Daniel and the figure. His growl deepened, vibrating through the ice beneath their feet. The shadow paused, head tilting slightly, assessing the dog, the officer, the storm. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the figure disappeared into the snowy darkness, melting into the night as if carried away by the wind itself. Daniel's stomach twisted. Whoever that was, they knew exactly where she was. They had been patient, watching, waiting for the right moment. The woman's hands trembled as she gripped Daniel's arm. "We need to move," she said, voice shaking. "They won't stop until they get me." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. "We're not going anywhere without backup." He glanced at Rex, who barked once more, scanning the riverbank. The German shepherd's eyes held something Daniel had never seen before, a recognition of the threat, a promise to protect, a silent command that no harm would come to this woman tonight. But the wind carried another sound, soft, distant, deliberate footsteps crunching in snow. Daniel froze, heart hammering. The footsteps were too careful to be casual, too deliberate to be innocent. Someone was approaching. From the darkness, a figure emerged, shapes blurring through the storm. Daniel's breath caught. The footsteps slowed, then stopped, leaving a haunting silence that pressed against them like the weight of ice. The woman looked at Daniel, eyes wide with terror. "It's him," she whispered. Rex growled, every muscle coiled, ready to strike. The officer tensed, senses alert. The storm roared around them, snow swirling, visibility near zero. But Daniel knew one thing with chilling certainty. The danger that had hunted her for months was standing closer than ever before. And this time there was nowhere to hide. The wind bit through every layer of clothing as Officer Daniel Reed guided the woman through Minneapolis streets, Rex close at his side, alert and tense. The storm had dulled the city's usual chaos, leaving only snow, shadows, and the sharp bite of cold. Daniel's eyes scanned every darkened doorway, every corner of alleyways where someone could be hiding. Each step felt precarious, like walking a tightrope over unseen threats. He tightened his grip on the leash, and Rex moved with purpose, muscles coiled, nose to the ground, sensing more than Daniel could see. Finally, they reached the edge of town, where a small homeless shelter huddled against the wind, its walls streaked with frost and paint peeling like frozen tears. Warm light spilled through grimy windows, casting long, flickering shadows on the snow outside. Daniel exhaled a breath of relief and motioned for the woman to follow him inside. The door creaked loudly as it opened, and the heat hit immediately, heavy and stale with the scent of overused blankets, soup, and human desperation. People shifted on cots, avoiding eye contact. The chatter was low, punctuated by coughs and murmurs. Daniel guided the woman inside, shielding her from curious stares, careful not to draw attention. Rex padded silently, ears flicking, nose twitching as he scanned the room. His growl was low, deliberate, protective. Daniel noticed that the tension in the dog was mirrored in the room itself. There was an undercurrent of unease, a quiet fear that wasn't about the storm, it was about something else, something that had to do with her presence. They moved to a corner where Daniel found a small, empty cot. The woman sank into it, coat wrapped tightly, teeth chattering. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling. I didn't know if I'd ever find safety." Daniel crouched beside her, gloved hand brushing her arm. "You're safe now," he said firmly, though the unease in his chest refused to fade. He glanced around the shelter again. Something wasn't right. Too many eyes averted, too many silent whispers. Rex suddenly stiffened, tail rigid, ears pinned back. The dog moved forward, sniffing between cots, growl low and rumbling. Daniel followed, alert. Rex stopped at the far corner where a thin, older man sat hunched, staring at the floor. The dog barked once, sharp and commanding, then sat, refusing to move. Daniel knelt beside him, cautious. "Who are you?" Daniel asked softly. The man didn't look up. Rex growled again, nudging Daniel forward. The dog's body language was clear. The man posed a threat, subtle but undeniable. Before Daniel could respond, the woman leaned closer, eyes wide. "No, not him," she whispered, voice barely audible. "He knows, he always knows." Her hand gripped his sleeve with white-knuckled intensity. I had to hide. They thought I was gone, but he could find me anywhere." Daniel's pulse accelerated. This shelter, which should have been a safe haven, suddenly felt claustrophobic, suffocating. The walls, the cots, the shadows, they all seemed complicit. Rex barked again, low and warning, fixating on the corner. Then the front door rattled violently, forcing every head to turn. Daniel's heart jumped. Through the frost-coated windows, he glimpsed a dark figure pressed against the storm, trying to push inside. His stomach dropped. This was no random person seeking warmth. This was the one she had been running from, the reason she had disappeared for 6 months. The woman's eyes went wide, fear cutting through the relief she'd felt just moments before. He found me," she whispered. Rex growled, low and deep, hackles raised. Daniel moved in front of the woman instinctively, eyes locked on the door. The storm outside rattled the building, but the real storm, the danger, was right there in the shelter. The door swung open with a gust, snow pouring in, and the figure stepped inside. The man was tall, imposing, his coat dusted with snow, eyes dark and calculating. His presence silenced the shelter. Even the storm seemed to pause. Daniel's hand hovered near his holster. "Step back," he warned, voice firm. "You're not getting past us." The man's gaze swept the room, landing on the woman. Recognition sparked in her eyes, and a wave of terror hit her so hard she nearly screamed. "You shouldn't be here," Daniel said, every muscle coiled, every nerve alert. The man smiled faintly, just enough to make the blood drain from Daniel's face. "I always find what I'm looking for," he said, voice low and dangerous. "And I've been looking for her for a long time." Rex barked violently, launching forward in a warning lunge, teeth bared but controlled. The man didn't flinch. He seemed almost amused. Daniel felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his chest. This was no ordinary threat. This was calculated, experienced, dangerous. The woman clutched Daniel's arm, pressing close. "What do we do?" she whispered, panic-stricken. Daniel exhaled, trying to stay calm. "We protect you. That's all that matters." The man took a step forward, deliberate, and the shelter seemed to shrink around them. Eyes averted, whispers stopped. The room held its breath. Rex growled, teeth glinting, every muscle coiled. The man's eyes flicked to the dog, then back to Daniel. His smile widened just slightly. "You've brought more than yourself into this little game, officer," he said. "I've been waiting for the perfect moment." Daniel felt the storm outside shift, the blizzard almost mocking them with its intensity, but the real storm was here, inside the shelter. Every second felt stretched, taut with danger, and he realized the night was far from over. The man took another step, and Daniel knew that this confrontation would decide everything. Her fate, the woman's future, and perhaps even their own survival. Rex barked again, sharp, warning, protective. And Daniel knew, deep in his chest, that the night was about to explode. The man smiled faintly, stepping closer, shadow merging with the storm. And then a distant sound echoed through the shelter, footsteps from outside, someone else, watching, waiting. Daniel's stomach dropped. This was no longer just a chase. It was a trap. The storm outside battered the shelter with relentless force, snow slamming against the windows like a warning drum. Inside, tension coiled tight as a spring. Officer Daniel Reed stayed close to the woman, hand resting lightly on her shoulder, trying to steady her trembling frame. Rex remained in front, body low and taut, eyes scanning every corner of the room, every shadow. The man in the coat, the one who had been waiting for her, moved with a predator's patience, deliberate and controlled. Daniel finally managed to pull the woman aside into the tiny office at the back of the shelter. The walls were thin, lined with peeling paint and a faint odor of mildew, but it offered enough privacy for the truth to spill. Her teeth chattered as she sank into a chair, still clutching the police-issued coat that had become her shield. They won't stop," she whispered, eyes darting nervously toward the door. "I had no choice. I had to disappear. I had to make them think I was dead." Daniel's brow furrowed. Who are we talking about?" Her hands trembled as she clutched the coat tighter. "My ex, he's not just anyone, he's dangerous. He has connections, powerful ones, people who would make sure I never got out. I thought if they believed I was dead, he couldn't find me. He could." Her voice faltered, tears spilling over. "I couldn't risk him finding me alive." Daniel's stomach twisted. The storm outside, the snow, the alleys, the footprints, they all made sense now. She hadn't just been lost, she had been hunted. And those months of disappearance weren't absence, they were survival. Rex whined softly, nudging the woman's side with his nose. Daniel realized then what the dog had been sensing all along. This wasn't a random threat. Rex had smelled fear, danger, and desperation in her. He had tracked her not just by scent, but by instinct, the instinct to protect someone in grave danger. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Daniel asked gently. "I couldn't," she said, voice breaking. "I tried, but everyone thought I was gone. My friends, the police, even my family, they mourned me. If I reached out, he'd know. I had no one to trust." She buried her face in her hands, shivering despite the coat. "I've been living in shelters, abandoned buildings, hiding, always moving, always alone." Daniel's heart ached. He could see the terror that had become her constant companion, the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She had survived the impossible, and now, after months of fear and isolation, she was finally found. But the danger had not ended. A sudden, sharp noise outside the office door made them both jump. Daniel's hand went to his holster instinctively, eyes scanning the cracked window. The man outside was still there, packing slowly, deliberately, waiting. The storm masked most sounds, but he moved with precision, controlling every moment, ensuring no detail went unnoticed. Rex growled low, hackles raised, ears flat. The dog's body language screamed imminent threat. Daniel's muscles coiled, ready to act. "He's going to come in," the woman whispered, voice trembling. "He knows I'm here now. He's patient, but he'll wait for the right moment to strike." Daniel nodded. "We'll stop him," he said, trying to inject calm into his voice though his pulse was racing. "Rex and I, nobody touches you." The woman's eyes met his, fear mixed with fragile hope. "You don't understand," she said. "He's ruthless. He won't stop until he gets me, or until—" Her voice trailed off, too terrified to continue. Daniel tightened his jaw. He had seen dangerous criminals, cold-blooded killers, men who preyed on the vulnerable. But this was different. This was personal, intimate, a predator targeting someone who had no weapons, no defenses, only a fragile life and a dog who refused to let harm come to her. A sudden sound, a heavy boot crunching in the snow outside the shelter, made the woman gasp. "He's coming," she whispered, pressing her face to Daniel's arm. Daniel's hand brushed hers in reassurance. "We'll protect you. We'll get through this." Rex barked, launching forward, fur bristling, teeth bared, standing as a living barrier between the woman and the approaching threat. The man outside paused, as if considering, calculating, before he began moving again, this time faster, with a predator's certainty. Daniel felt his pulse spike. This was it. The moment the months of fear, hiding, and running had been leading to. The confrontation was imminent, every second stretched into eternity. The woman gripped Daniel's arm tighter, fear giving way to a desperate trust. I don't know if I can," she whispered. "You can," Daniel said firmly. "Rex will help, and I won't let anything happen to you." The footsteps stopped just outside the office door. Silence fell, broken only by the storm outside and the low growl of Rex. Daniel's breath fogged, heart hammering. Then the doorknob rattled, and the man finally stepped inside. The office door slammed open, snow and wind spilling in with it. The man Daniel had been tracking for months stepped inside, coat dusted with snow, eyes dark and unyielding. His presence filled the tiny room, oppressive and dangerous like the calm before a storm that no one could outrun. Every muscle in Daniel's body tensed, hand hovering over his holster, while Rex stood between them and the woman, hackles raised, teeth bared, growling low and threatening. The woman clutched Daniel's arm, coat wrapped around her like armor, eyes wide with terror. "Don't, please," she whispered, voice shaking, almost drowned out by the storm outside. The man smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "I've been patient," he said, voice low and deliberate. "Too patient. You thought you could hide. You thought disappearing would save you, but I always find what I'm looking for." Rex barked, sharp and commanding, stepping forward. The dog's growl escalated, vibrating through the floor, warning, threatening, signaling danger. The man's gaze flicked to the dog, then back to Daniel. "You brought a friend," the man said, tilting his head. "Does he bite?" Daniel felt the tension coil in his chest, but he held his ground. "Try me and you'll find out," he said firmly, voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. The man took a deliberate step closer, reaching inside his coat. Daniel reacted instantly, drawing his weapon, but Rex lunged first, teeth flashing, growls deafening. The man froze, startled by the dog's sudden, explosive movement. Daniel pressed the advantage, stepping forward, weapon aimed, eyes locked on the man's hands. "You're not getting her," Daniel said, voice low, steady, resolute. "Not tonight, not ever." The man hesitated. Then, with a sudden, sharp movement, he drew a small pistol from his coat. Daniel's mind raced. Reflexes kicked in. But before a single shot could be fired, Rex surged with lightning speed, knocking the weapon aside with his powerful body, teeth snapping dangerously close. The man stumbled, caught off guard, and Daniel tackled him to the ground, restraining him as Rex circled, teeth bared, growling, refusing to relent. The struggle was short but intense. The man's strength was significant, but Daniel's adrenaline-fueled determination, combined with Rex's fierce protection, proved unstoppable. Moments later, the suspect was handcuffed, panting, eyes flashing with anger and disbelief. The shelter's occupants peeked from corners, wide-eyed, frozen by the sudden eruption of danger. The woman sank to the floor, coat pulled tightly around her, trembling. Daniel knelt beside her, hand on her shoulder. "It's over," he said softly, though his chest heaved with exertion. Rex, still alert, approached her, nose nudging her side gently. The woman's eyes filled with tears as she wrapped her arms around the dog, burying her face in his thick fur. "Thank you," she whispered, voice choked. "You both saved me." Daniel allowed himself a small, exhausted smile. The storm outside had not let up, snow swirling violently against the windows, but inside the shelter, for the first time in months, there was a fragile peace. The threat was neutralized. The woman was safe. Hours later, as dawn began to filter through the storm clouds, Daniel stepped outside with Rex. The city lay buried under snow, silent and serene in stark contrast to the violence and fear of the night. He watched as the woman was escorted safely to a nearby safe house, hand in hand with officers ensuring her protection. Rex nudged Daniel's leg, tail wagging lightly now, eyes soft. Daniel knelt, scratching the dog behind the ears. "You were incredible tonight, boy," he said. "You found the one I never expected." The truth hit Daniel like a rush of warmth through the cold. Rex hadn't just followed a scent or tracked footsteps. He had recognized fear, survival, and someone who needed protection more than anything else. The dog's instincts, loyalty, and unwavering courage had saved a life. The woman, looking back from the safe distance, waved, a fragile but genuine smile breaking through the exhaustion and fear. Daniel watched, heart swelling, knowing that she had a chance now to rebuild her life, free from the shadow that had hunted her. As they walked back toward the cruiser, Rex at his side, Daniel felt the snow crunch under his boots, each step grounding him in the reality of what had happened. The night had been relentless, dangerous, and merciless, but it had also revealed something extraordinary: courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a man, his dog, and a life saved against all odds. The storm continued, but Daniel and Rex moved forward, leaving the darkness behind. And somewhere in the swirling snow, a silent promise lingered. No matter what came next, Rex would always find the ones who needed him most. The city was still buried in white, the world quieted under snow, but Daniel knew as long as Rex was at his side, there was no shadow they couldn't face, no danger they couldn't confront. The night had ended, but the bond forged in its chaos between officer, dog, and survivor would last a lifetime. And for the woman who had been lost to the world, finally, for the first time in months, she could breathe truly live and trust that she was not alone.